In 1942, a woman named Hattie Louise kept a root cellar beneath her shotgun house in rural Georgia. The shelves were lined with mason jars filled with vegetables, meats, and fruits she had put up herself. She never owned a refrigerator. She never needed one. Her family ate through every winter on what those jars held. The county extension agent told her the methods were outdated and unsafe. Hattie Louise outlived him by 22 years. Number 18 on this list was banned by the USDA in the 1980s. Number 7 uses a technique that food scientists did not understand until 2016. These 25 preserving tricks were passed down by Black women who kept families fed without electricity, without government approval, and without a single laboratory. They were dismissed because the knowledge came from kitchens, not textbooks. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 banned African American preserving tricks scientists now say were genius. Number 25, salt box pork curing. Before refrigeration reached Black homes in the rural South, salt was the only thing standing between your family and hunger. A hog was slaughtered in November when the air turned cold. Every cut was rubbed thick with coarse salt and stacked in a wooden box, layer after layer, like bricks in a wall, with salt packed between each piece. The meat sat for weeks, drawing moisture out through osmosis until bacteria could not survive on its surface. That box was the family's bank account in meat. The USDA later said this method was unreliable because home cooks could not measure salinity precisely enough. But food scientists at Texas A&M have confirmed that salt concentrations above 6% create conditions where salmonella and E. coli cannot reproduce. Your great-grandmother did not own a salinity meter. She used her hands and her mother's memory. The pork lasted through March. That was enough. Number 24, Potlikker preservation. When your grandmother boiled collard greens with a ham hock for 3 hours, the liquid left behind was not waste. It was medicine in a mason jar. She saved that greenish broth, rich as liquid gold, poured it into jars, and kept it on the back porch in winter or the root cellar in summer. Families drank it straight or sopped it with cornbread. Extension agents told Black families to throw the cooking water away because boiling destroyed the vitamins. They were half right and completely wrong. Researchers in Spain found that boiling extracted 50% of total flavonoids and 60% of vitamin C into the cooking liquid. The vitamins were not destroyed. They migrated into the potlikker like passengers changing trains. The women who saved that broth were capturing every nutrient the greens had to give. They did not need a study to know it kept their children strong through winter. Number 23, lard sealing. After rendering hog fat over a low fire until it turned white and clean, your grandmother poured that liquid lard over cooked meats in a crock until the fat covered every surface by at least an inch. When the lard cooled and solidified, it created an airtight seal like a wax lid that no bacteria could penetrate. The meat stayed preserved for months in a root cellar without any refrigeration at all. Families in the Delta kept crocks of lard-sealed pork in their cellars all winter. Health officials in the 1950s called this method dangerous and unsanitary. Modern food science tells a different story. Rendered lard, stored in a cool environment, creates an anaerobic barrier that prevents oxidation and microbial growth. French chefs call this technique confit and charge you $40 a plate. Black women in Mississippi called it putting up meat and charged nothing. Today's gourmet is yesterday's survival. Number 22, smoke curing with green hickory. In the smokehouse behind nearly every Black homestead in the rural South, hams and shoulders hung from rafters above a smoldering pit of green hickory wood. The smoke was not just for flavor, it was chemistry in the air, invisible and exact. The phenols in wood smoke acted as antioxidants that slowed fat breakdown. The formaldehyde and acetic acid lowered the pH on the surface of the meat, creating an antimicrobial barrier that worked around the clock. A properly smoked ham lasted an entire year hanging in that smokehouse. The USDA declared backyard smokehouses unsanitary in the mid-20th century because temperatures could not be precisely controlled. But the compounds in hickory smoke do the same work whether you monitor them with a thermometer or not. Your grandfather knew the smoke was ready when it smelled right. He read that smokehouse the way a doctor reads a chart. He could not name a single phenol. He did not need to. Number 21, vinegar pepper sauce. Every kitchen table in the Black South had a bottle of vinegar with hot peppers floating inside. It was not a condiment, it was a preservation system disguised as a table sauce. The peppers released capsaicin into the vinegar over time, creating a solution with both antimicrobial and antioxidant properties. You shook it over greens, beans, rice, or anything that needed brightening. When the vinegar ran low, you poured more in. The same peppers lasted for months, sometimes years. Some families passed the same bottle down through an entire growing season, refilling it the way you top off a gas tank. Food safety officials warned against storing peppers in vinegar at room temperature because the pH might not be low enough to prevent botulism. But vinegar sits at a pH between 2.4 and 3.4, well below the 4.6 threshold where Clostridium botulinum can grow. The science was on your grandmother's side the entire time. She just never got the credit. Number 20, buttermilk soaking. Before you cook tough cuts of meat or wild game, you soak them in buttermilk overnight. Black women across the South knew this trick so deeply that it was never written down in any recipe. It lived in the hands, not on paper. The buttermilk tenderized the meat and extended its usable life by a full day or more. A tough piece of squirrel or rabbit that would have been like chewing rope came out of that buttermilk bath, soft enough to fall apart on the fork. Health departments said raw meat sitting in unrefrigerated buttermilk was a breeding ground for pathogens. They missed the point entirely. The lactic acid bacteria in buttermilk produce antimicrobial compounds, including bacteriocins and hydrogen peroxide. The pH drops low enough to inhibit harmful bacteria, while the enzymes break down tough connective tissue. Science now calls this biopreservation. Your grandmother called it getting the meat ready. Same process, different vocabulary. Number 19, sun-drying fruit on tin roofs. This was summer's most important chore in the Black South, and nobody treated it lightly. In July and August, Black women in Georgia and the Carolinas sliced peaches, apples, and figs and laid them out on clean cloth atop tin roofs that baked in the summer sun. The heat and airflow removed moisture until the fruit turned leathery, like soft candy, and could be stored in cotton sacks through the coldest months. The process took 2 or 3 days, depending on the thickness of the slices. Women checked the fruit every few hours, turning the pieces to dry evenly and chasing off insects. Children were assigned to watch the trays and shoo away birds. It was a family operation with real consequences. If you did not dry enough fruit in July, your family had no fruit in January. That was not an inconvenience. That was a gap in the diet that nothing else could fill. The USDA advised against sun drying because it could not guarantee consistent temperatures or protection from contamination. They recommended electric dehydrators that cost more than some families earned in a month. But the tin roofs reached temperatures above 140 degrees on a July afternoon. That is the exact threshold the USDA now recommends for safe dehydration. The women were hitting the target without ever reading the manual. The tin roof was doing the same work as a $200 appliance, using nothing but sunlight. A church woman in Savannah dried enough peaches every summer to fill her pantry through Christmas. She gave bags of dried fruit as gifts the way other people gave cards. Neighbors came by in October asking if she had any peaches left. She always did. She had been doing it since the 1930s. Her peaches never made anyone sick, not once in 50 years. That tin roof was her dehydrator. The sun was free. The knowledge was what cost something. Number 18, ash lye hominy. This is the one that regulators tried hardest to stop. Black families in the Deep South soaked dried corn kernels in a solution of water and hardwood ash to make hominy. The lye from the ash dissolved the tough outer hull of the corn and transformed it into something softer, larger, and far more nutritious. The process is called nixtamalization. Nobody in rural Alabama used that word. They called it making lye hominy. Public health officials banned the sale of homemade lye hominy in several states by the 1970s because lye is caustic and improperly prepared batches could cause chemical burns. The caution was not unreasonable, but the technique itself was brilliant. Nixtamalization releases niacin that is otherwise locked inside the corn. Without it, communities that depend on corn develop pellagra, a devastating deficiency disease. Indigenous peoples knew this thousands of years ago. Black families inherited the knowledge and kept it alive. Scientists did not fully explain the biochemistry until the late 20th century. The women who made lye hominy every fall were preventing a disease they had never heard of. When the government said stop, families who listened got sicker. Families who kept their ash hoppers in the backyard did not. Number 17, burying vegetables in sand. Sweet potatoes, turnips, and beets were layered in wooden crates with damp sand between each row, then stored in a root cellar or buried in a pit dug into the earth. The sand held just enough moisture to prevent shriveling, but not enough to encourage rot. It worked like a thermostat made of earth. Your family could pull fresh vegetables from that crate in February that had been buried since October. They tasted almost as fresh as the day they went into the ground. County agents called it unsanitary because soil contact could introduce bacteria. But the sand was not soil. It was a humidity control system, as precise in its own way as a walk-in cooler. Modern cold storage facilities use the same principle, controlled humidity between 85 and 95% at temperatures just above freezing. A hole in the ground in Georgia maintained roughly those conditions from November through March without a single kilowatt of electricity. Number 16, cane syrup preserving. In the sugarcane belt of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast, Black families poured thick cane syrup over fruits and sometimes meats to preserve them. The syrup's sugar concentration was so high that it pulled water out of any bacteria that landed on the surface, killing them through osmotic pressure. The same principle makes honey one of the only foods that never spoils. Nutritionists in the 20th century dismissed syrup preservation as nothing more than candy making and warned it was too high in sugar to be considered a legitimate food safety practice. But osmotic preservation is now a recognized method in food science. The sugar concentration in cane syrup exceeds 60%, which is well above the threshold needed to prevent microbial growth. Those families were practicing the same science that keeps your store-bought jam safe on the shelf for years. The jar was different, the chemistry was identical. Number 15, salt brine, fish preservation. Along the rivers and coastlines of the South, Black families caught more fish than they could eat in a single day. catfish, brine, crappie, whatever the river offered. But without refrigeration, fish spoiled faster than almost any other food. So the surplus went into a crock of heavily salted water, packed tight with enough salt to make the brine feel thick on your fingers. The brine penetrated the flesh and dropped the water activity to a level where spoilage organisms could not survive. When your family needed protein, you pulled a piece from the brine, soaked it in fresh water to draw out the excess salt, and cooked it as if it had come straight from the river. Fried saltfish with grits and onions was a breakfast that fed families along the Carolina coast for generations. Regulators said home brining was inconsistent and risky. Modern food scientists confirmed that salt concentrations above 10% effectively halt bacterial growth. The women who packed fish in crocks every summer did not measure water activity. They tasted the brine. If it was salty enough to pucker your lips, it was salty enough to keep the fish safe. The tongue was their instrument. Number 14, rendered tallow coating. Beef tallow, rendered slowly from suet until clear and golden, was poured over cheese wheels, sausage links, and dried meats to create a waxy seal that blocked air and moisture. The tallow hardened at room temperature into a firm barrier, like a coat of armor that kept food usable for months. A sausage link sealed in tallow could sit on a cellar shelf through an entire winter and come out tasting nearly the same as the day it was made. The seal was so complete that you had to crack it apart with your hands before you could slice the meat inside. Health departments called this outdated once refrigeration became affordable, but tallow coating works on the same principle as vacuum sealing. It creates an oxygen-free environment that prevents oxidation and stops aerobic bacteria from growing. You can still find artisan cheese makers in Vermont using wax coatings for the same reason. The difference is that they charge a premium for it. Your grandmother gave it away. Number 13, fermented hot sauce. Black families in Louisiana and the Carolina Low Country packed fresh peppers into jars with salt and let them sit on the shelf for weeks or months. The peppers bubbled, softened, and transformed into a tangy, complex hot sauce through lacto fermentation. No vinegar needed, no cooking required. The salt drew water from the peppers and created a brine where lactic acid bacteria thrived, while harmful organisms could not. The longer the sauce sat, the deeper the flavor became. A jar that started sharp and simple in September tasted rounded and complex by Thanksgiving, like wine aging in a barrel. Health codes eventually required commercially sold hot sauces to be heat processed, which killed the beneficial bacteria that made fermented sauce special. But research published in journals on food microbiology has confirmed that lacto-fermented foods contain probiotic strains that support digestive health. The hot sauce on your grandmother's table was alive with beneficial bacteria that a pasteurized bottle from the grocery store does not contain. She was feeding your family's gut microbiome before that phrase existed. Number 12, open kettle canning. Your grandmother filled mason jars with boiling hot fruit, jelly, or tomatoes and sealed them immediately with a lid and ring. No water bath, no pressure canner, just the heat of the food itself creating a vacuum as the jar cooled. You heard the lid pop and click, and that sound meant the seal had taken. That pop was as satisfying as locking a door. The USDA declared open kettle canning unsafe in the 1980s because the temperature of the food drops too quickly to guarantee a sterile seal. And they had a point. For low-acid foods like green beans or meats, the risk of botulism was real and should not be dismissed. But for high-acid foods like tomatoes, fruits, and pickles, the combination of heat and acidity created conditions where Clostridium botulinum cannot grow. Millions of jars of preserves were put up this way across the Black South without incident. The method was not reckless. It was specific. Black women knew which foods could be kettle canned and which ones needed the pressure canner. They sorted that knowledge without a pH meter and passed it down at kitchen tables like an inheritance. Number 11, grease jar reuse. Every black kitchen in the South kept a can or jar on the back of the stove where leftover cooking grease was poured after frying. Bacon grease, chicken drippings, pork fat, it all went into that jar and was used again and again to season skillets, fried cornbread, and flavor vegetables. Health officials called this unsanitary and warned it could harbor bacteria and rancid fats that promoted disease. The science is more complicated than that. Render animal fats stored at room temperature remain stable far longer than vegetable oils because their saturated fat structure resists oxidation. The salt content from seasoned cooking further inhibited bacterial growth. As long as the grease was strained and kept free of food particles, it stayed safe for weeks. Modern chefs now sell small jars of bacon fat at specialty stores for $10. Your grandmother kept hers in a coffee can and never thought twice about it. That grease jar was not a health hazard. It was a flavor vault, a seasoning library in a single can that black women maintained for generations. Number 10, sassafras file powder. The leaves of the sassafras tree, dried in the sun and ground to a fine green powder, served as both a seasoning and a thickening agent in gumbo and stews across Louisiana and the Gulf South. A spoonful stirred into gumbo at the end of cooking thickened the broth and added a flavor that nothing else could replicate. Black and Creole cooks learned this from indigenous peoples and carried it forward for centuries. The FDA restricted sassafras root bark in 1960 because it contained safrole, a compound linked to liver damage in rodents, given massive doses. But the leaves contain almost no safrole. The ban confused the bark with the leaf, and the entire plant's reputation suffered. File powder from leaves remained technically legal, but fell under suspicion. Food researchers have since confirmed that sassafras leaf powder contains negligible safrole levels at culinary doses. The women who kept grinding those leaves knew something the regulators did not. The leaf and the root are not the same thing. Number 9, chow chow relish. At the end of every growing season, black women in the South chopped whatever vegetables remained in the garden. Green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, peppers. All of it went into a pot with vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, and turmeric, then was cooked down and packed into jars. Nothing was wasted. Every last vegetable that would have rotted on the vine became a condiment that lasted through winter. The recipe changed every year because the garden changed every year. One autumn, you had more green tomatoes. The next, more cabbage. Chow chow was a mirror of whatever the earth decided to give you, and that made every batch unique. Food safety authorities cautioned against homemade relishes because inconsistent vinegar concentrations could allow bacterial growth. But the combination of vinegar, sugar, and heat creates a preservation environment that food scientists call a hurdle system. Each element alone might not be sufficient. Together, they create multiple barriers that spoilage organisms cannot overcome. The science has a fancy name now. Your grandmother called it putting up chow chow. Same barriers, different labels. Number 8, salted watermelon rind, pickles. Nothing went to waste in a household that understood what waste really meant. After the red flesh was eaten, black families in the South peeled the green skin from the white rind, cut it into cubes, and soaked them in a heavy salt brine overnight. The salt drew moisture from the rind and firmed the texture, turning something soft into something with bite. The next day, the rind was rinsed. then boiled in a spiced vinegar syrup with cinnamon, cloves, and allspice. The kitchen smelled like Christmas in the middle of August. The rind pieces turned translucent as they absorbed the syrup, then were packed into jars and sealed while still hot. The result was a sweet, tangy, crunchy pickle that lasted for months. Church suppers put watermelon rind pickles on the table next to the deviled eggs, and the jar always went home empty. Health authorities dismissed rind pickles as a waste product novelty, but the double preservation method, first salt brining and then acid pickling, creates two separate antimicrobial barriers. Modern pickle manufacturers use the same sequential process. Your grandmother just used it on the part of the watermelon that everyone else threw away. That rind was her pantry's safety net. Number 7, meat drying on smokehouse rafters. Long strips of beef, venison, or pork were salted, peppered, and hung from rafters in a well-ventilated smokehouse where they dried slowly over days or weeks. The combination of salt, low moisture, and smoke exposure created a shelf-stable protein source that could be eaten without cooking. The USDA classified home-dried meats as potentially hazardous because ambient drying conditions could not guarantee temperatures sufficient to destroy trichinella or other parasites. That concern had merit for pork, but research published in the Journal of Food Science has shown that salt concentration and prolonged drying reduce water activity below 0.85, the threshold where nearly all foodborne pathogens cannot survive. The combination of salt, smoke phenols, and dehydration created a triple preservation system. Scientists call it a multi-hurdle approach. Black families in the South had been using it since before the Civil War. They called it jerky. They called it dried meat. They called it supper when there was nothing else. Number 6, cornmeal dusting for grain storage. Dried beans and peas stored in cotton sacks were dusted with a thin layer of cornmeal before being tied shut and placed on high shelves in the pantry. The cornmeal absorbed excess moisture and created a physical barrier that discouraged weevils and other insects from burrowing into the beans. Opening a sack of beans that had been properly dusted was like opening a time capsule. Agricultural agents called this an old wives' tale and recommended chemical pesticides instead, but entomologists have since documented that inert dusts work by absorbing the waxy coating on insect exoskeletons, causing them to dehydrate and die. The cornmeal served the same function as diatomaceous earth, which organic farmers now pay good money to buy. Your grandmother got the same result from a cup of cornmeal she already had in her cupboard. She was practicing integrated pest management before the term was coined. Number 5, sweet potato pit storage. After the fall harvest, sweet potatoes were bedded in straw, placed in a shallow pit dug into dry ground, covered with more straw and a layer of earth, and left to cure for 2 to 3 weeks. The warmth of the earth triggered a natural process that converted starches in the potato into sugars, making them sweeter and longer lasting. Then the pit was opened and the potatoes were moved to a cooler cellar for long-term storage. Extension agents discouraged pit storage because underground moisture could promote mold. But the curing step was the key that regulators overlooked. The brief warm period activates suberization, a process where the potato forms a protective corky layer over any wounds or cuts in the skin. That layer seals out rot organisms and extends storage life dramatically. Like a bandage, the potato grows itself. Sweet potato researchers at North Carolina State confirmed this process in controlled studies. The women who taught themselves to cure potatoes in the earth figured it out without a microscope. Number 4, clay pot cooling. In the years before electric refrigeration reached Black communities, families stored milk, butter, and leftovers in unglazed clay pots that had been soaked in water. The water seeped through the porous clay and evaporated on the outer surface, pulling heat away from the contents inside. The pot's temperature dropped 10 to 15 degrees below the surrounding air, working like a refrigerator powered by nothing but breeze and water. Health inspectors said clay pots were unsanitary because the porous material could harbor bacteria, but the cooling mechanism is pure physics. Evaporative cooling has been documented in scientific literature as an effective method of reducing food spoilage in tropical and subtropical climates. Engineers in Nigeria have adapted this same principle into modern clay pot refrigerators that keep produce fresh for weeks without electricity. The technology has come full circle. What was banned in Alabama is now celebrated as sustainable innovation in West Africa. The principle never changed, only who got credit for it. Number 3, molasses curing. Before commercial sugar was affordable, Black families in the South used thick blackstrap molasses to cure hams, bacon, and pork shoulders. The meat was rubbed with salt first, then coated in a paste of molasses, black pepper, and sometimes red pepper. The sugar in the molasses drew moisture from the surface of the meat through osmosis, while the pepper provided additional antimicrobial compounds. The result was a dark, sweet, peppery cured meat with a flavor that commercial hams could not match. Food safety regulators lumped molasses curing in with other unapproved home methods because there were no standardized recipes to test. But the science is straightforward. High sugar concentrations inhibit bacterial growth. Salt lowers water activity. Capsaicin from peppers has documented antimicrobial properties. 3 preservation barriers working together in one coating like a triple lock on a door. A woman in rural Alabama could cure a ham in December and eat from it through Easter. She did not need a laboratory. She needed salt, molasses, and patience. Number 2, dried bean storage in cotton sacks. Families that grew their own field peas, butter beans, and lima beans dried them on the vine until the pods rattled when shaken. The beans were shelled, spread on a screen to finish drying in the sun, then stored in tightly tied cotton sacks hung from nails in the pantry ceiling. Hanging them prevented ground moisture from reaching the beans, and the cotton allowed just enough air circulation to keep condensation from forming inside the sack. Agricultural officials recommended glass jars and chemical treatments to prevent insect damage, but cotton sack storage worked because it maintained the beans at the ideal moisture content below 10%, where mold cannot grow and insects cannot complete their life cycle. The hanging position kept the beans away from rodents. The airflow kept them dry. This was not guesswork. This was engineering refined over generations by women who could not afford to lose a single bag of beans because that bag was February's supper. Number 1, root cellar jar storage. This is where Hattie Louise started. The root cellar beneath her shotgun house in Georgia held everything her family needed to survive from harvest to spring. Jars of pickled okra, canned tomatoes, preserved peaches, and salted pork lined the shelves. The temperature underground stayed between 50 and 60 degrees year-round, cool enough to slow bacterial growth, but warm enough to prevent freezing. The humidity stayed naturally between 80 and 90%, which kept sealed jars from drying out and root vegetables from shriveling. The county called it outdated. The government said to buy a refrigerator. But a root cellar uses zero electricity, produces zero emissions, and maintains the exact temperature and humidity range that modern food storage guidelines recommend. Engineers now study root cellar design for sustainable housing projects. Universities published papers on passive underground cooling. The physics were always sound. A woman in Georgia knew that in 1942. She did not need a peer-reviewed journal. She needed her family fed through March, and those jars did the job every single year. Frying in cast iron instead of non-stick pans was the only option in traditional African American kitchens, and science confirms this was superior choice. Cast iron retains heat exceptionally well, maintaining consistent oil temperature even when cold food is added, preventing greasy results from temperature drops. Heavy pans distribute heat evenly, eliminating hot spots that burn some pieces while undercooking others. Scientists documented that properly seasoned cast iron develops natural non-stick surface rivaling synthetic coatings without chemical concerns. The iron leaches small amounts of dietary iron into food, providing nutritional benefits modern cookware cannot offer. These pans pass through generations, gaining better seasoning with each use. What seemed stubborn tradition was wisdom about heat management. Fried cornmeal mush was breakfast magic that transformed yesterday's leftovers into something crispy and golden for the morning table. Families poured leftover mush into pans, let it set overnight until firm, then sliced it thick and fried each piece in bacon grease until the exterior turned crunchy, while inside stayed soft and creamy. The edges caramelized, adding sweetness that complemented drizzles of molasses or sorghum syrup. This dish wasted nothing, turning what might be discarded into hearty breakfasts that filled bellies before school or work. Children loved the contrast between shatteringly crisp crust and smooth interior, eating slice after slice. The smell of frying cornmeal filled kitchens with warmth on cold mornings. Fried sweet potato pies were portable treasures that turned holiday flavors into handheld treats perfect for church socials. Cooks prepared spiced sweet potato filling, tucked it inside rounds of homemade dough, then sealed the edges before lowering them into hot oil. The crust fried golden and flaky while filling stayed warm and creamy, creating packages of comfort eaten without plates or forks. These hand pies appeared at revivals, picnics, and homecomings where food needed to travel well. The filling used beloved spices, including cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla that perfumed the air. Children loved these because they could eat while playing without returning to the table. Fried sweet potato pies was celebration food made practical, bringing holiday warmth to everyday occasions. Storing bread with celery stalks to maintain freshness was an African American pantry trick that produced remarkable results in households across the country. Grandmothers would place a stalk or two inside bread boxes and storage bags, somehow extending the loaf's softness by several days beyond what seemed possible. Modern food scientists now understand that celery releases moisture at a rate that perfectly balances bread's tendency to dry out without promoting mold growth. The celery sacrificed itself, becoming dry while the bread stayed fresh. This technique was valuable in households where bread was baked weekly and needed to last between baking days. Women traded this knowledge at church gatherings, perfecting the ratio through shared experience. African American grandmothers rendered their own lard from pork fat, ensuring purity commercial products cannot match. What was dismissed as backward cooking has been vindicated by nutritional science, proving traditional wisdom was ahead of its time. Salting meat hours before frying was a practice modern cooks abandoned in favor of last-minute seasoning. Yet, African American kitchens maintained this tradition with delicious results. The technique involved generously salting chicken or fish and allowing it to rest for several hours or overnight before cooking. Salt draws moisture to the surface initially, but over time dissolves and is reabsorbed, carrying flavor deep into meat while restructuring proteins for better texture. Scientists call this dry brining, and research confirms it produces juicier, more flavorful results than immediate cooking. The method seasons meat throughout rather than just on surface, eliminating bland bites. Grandmothers knew good fried chicken required overnight preparation, and patience produced legendary results. Applying mayonnaise to remove water stains from wooden furniture was an African-American remedy that furniture experts now endorse. Grandmothers would spread mayonnaise over white rings left by wet glasses, cover with cloth, and let it sit overnight, revealing restored wood by morning. Food scientists understand that mayonnaise's combination of oil and vinegar penetrates wood grain, rehydrating dried fibers, while mild acid dissolves mineral deposits. This technique saved countless tables from permanent damage without expensive refinishing. The hack required only pantry staples and patience, making it accessible to any household. Women passed this knowledge through generations, rescuing precious furniture that represented significant family investments. The smoke point test was a visual skill that separated novice cooks from masters of the fryer. Before kitchen thermometers became common, African American cooks learned to read oil temperatures through careful observation. They watched for the first wisps of smoke rising from the surface, knowing this indicated peak frying temperature. Too little heat meant soggy, grease-soaked food, while too much smoke meant burnt coatings and bitter flavors. Experienced cooks develop intuition for the exact shimmer and movement of properly heated oil, describing the moment when the surface seemed alive with tiny ripples. This knowledge passed through demonstration rather than written instruction, with mothers guiding daughters to recognize subtle visual cues. Mastering the smoke point test guaranteed perfectly golden fried foods every time. Fried pig ears were crunchy delicacies, showcasing the soul food commitment to using every part of the hog. The ears were cleaned, boiled until tender, then sliced into strips and fried until impossibly crispy, shattering with each bite. The texture was unique, mostly cartilage that became crackling and light when properly fried, carrying mild pork flavor enhanced by seasonings. Families served them as snacks or bar food, often with hot sauce and vinegar on the side. The ears were affordable because butchers sold them cheaply, making them accessible during lean times. Children either loved or avoided them based on texture preferences, but those who acquired the taste craved them into adulthood. Fried pig ears proved resourcefulness and deliciousness could coexist. Using bacon grease to season cast iron skillets was the cornerstone of African American kitchen maintenance for generations. Grandmothers carefully saved rendered bacon fat in ceramic crocks kept near the stove, using it to coat skillets after each washing and before storage. Scientists now confirm that animal fats create superior polymerized seasoning layers compared to vegetable oils, bonding more effectively with iron at high temperatures. The practice produced naturally non-stick surfaces that improve with age and continued use. This technique was taught to daughters standing at their mother's elbows, watching simple pork fat transform rough metal into cooking treasures. The seasoned skillets became family heirlooms, passed down through generations with pride. Here is what these 25 tricks have in common. They all worked. They worked for decades, sometimes centuries, in kitchens where there was no electricity and no government manual and no margin for error. They were banned or discouraged, not because the science was wrong, but because the people practicing them did not have degrees or laboratories or the kind of authority that gets listened to. The knowledge came from Black women standing over fires, packing crocks, hanging meat, and filling jars in kitchens that history never bothered to photograph. Try one of these methods yourself. Ferment a pepper sauce, dry some fruit in the sun, save your pot liquor the next time you cook greens, then sit down and eat what you made. Because these were never just tricks. They were a system of knowledge built by people who had no choice but to get it right. Share which one surprised you most in the comments. Tell us if your grandmother used any of these methods, because these are not forgotten skills. They are proof that the smartest food science in American history came from the people nobody asked.